The morning air around the Marine Corps base was cool and still, the kind of air that usually made new recruits nervous before they took their first steps inside. The tall metal gates stood open, and people moved in steady lines, checking in with officers and presenting their documents. Among the groups of loud, excited recruits, a quiet young woman walked alone. She wasn't big or muscular, and she didn't look like someone who had grown up dreaming of wearing a uniform. She looked calm, steady, and focused. Her name was Ariana. She clutched a small folder in her hand, the one containing her ID and paperwork she had triple-checked the night before. She had prepared herself for this day for months. Actually years, though she didn't often admit that out loud. She had left her small town early, traveling for hours without saying much to anyone. She didn't need to. Her mind was already on the task ahead. When she reached the check-in station, she stepped into the shortest line. The officer at the desk, a tall Marine with broad shoulders and sharp eyes, barely glanced at her before scanning the line behind her. His name tag said Reynolds. He looked like the kind of person used to being listened to, respected, and never questioned. He tapped a pen on the table, impatient even though Ariana stood right in front of him. "ID," he said, not even looking up. Ariana handed it over with quiet confidence, though her fingers trembled just a little. She had nothing to hide, nothing to fear, or so she thought. Captain Reynolds held her ID for half a second before he lifted his head, eyebrows rising in surprise. He stared at the small card, then at her and then back at the card. His expression shifted, and a small smirk appeared on his face. It wasn't the friendly kind. It was the kind people used when they had already made up their mind about someone. "You expect me to believe this is real?" he asked loudly, waving the card slightly. The recruits in line beside her turned their heads. A few tried to hide their smiles, waiting to see what would happen next. Ariana kept her voice steady. "Yes, sir. It's real." Reynolds let out a short laugh, the kind that wasn't meant to be shared, but meant to embarrass. "You're telling me this ID belongs to you?" "You?" he repeated, looking her up and down. Ariana didn't fit the usual picture of a recruit. She wasn't tall. She wasn't loud. She didn't carry herself like someone trying to prove anything. Her hair was pulled back neatly. Her clothes were simple. She stood quietly, not puffing her chest or showing nerves. And maybe that was exactly why Reynolds didn't believe her. "You don't look like someone with this level of clearance," he said, tapping the ID with his finger. "Looks like someone printed this at home." Someone in the line laughed softly. Ariana heard it, but she didn't react. Not to the laugh, and not to Reynolds' mocking tone. She had trained herself to stay calm no matter what. She knew frustration only made situations worse. "With respect, sir," she replied. "If you scan it, you'll see it's valid." Reynolds raised an eyebrow, almost amused by her steady tone. "Scan it?" he said. "If you're going to hand me something fake, at least try harder. I see this all the time. People thinking they can talk their way in." Ariana remained still. "It isn't fake." Reynolds leaned back in his chair slightly, studying her face. "Where did you even get this clearance code? Do you know what level this is? People don't just walk in with this. They earn it." Ariana could have told him. She could have explained her years of field medical training, her humanitarian work overseas, her certifications that most people twice her age didn't have. She could have told him about the long nights working in remote clinics, the drills she ran, the emergencies she handled when there were no doctors nearby. She could have told him that her clearance was given because she had once saved the life of someone very important. Someone Reynolds would instantly recognize. But she didn't talk about those things. She never had. "Sir," she repeated calmly. "The ID is real." Reynolds let out a louder laugh this time, clearly enjoying the attention he was getting. Some of the recruits behind Ariana exchanged amused glances. A few stepped to the side so they could see better. Moments like this didn't happen every day. Someone being challenged before even stepping through the door. One recruit whispered, "She's done. They'll send her home." Another whispered back, "She doesn't stand a chance." Ariana heard every whisper, but her face didn't change. She kept her breathing slow, her hands at her sides. She had learned long ago that staying calm was its own strength. Reynolds finally stood up from his chair, holding her ID between two fingers like it was something he couldn't wait to get rid of. "All right," he said loudly. "Let's settle this. If this ID is real, I'll personally apologize. I doubt I'll need to." He turned to the small machine on his desk, the scanner that checked every ID. He waved hers over it carelessly, expecting it to flash red like he claimed fake IDs always did. But the machine didn't flash red. It froze. The small screen turned dark, then lit up again with a code Reynolds hadn't seen before. He blinked, leaning forward. The screen didn't show an error. It didn't reject her. It displayed a clearance message he didn't understand. Something far above his rank. The recruits behind Ariana watched him, confused by his sudden pause. He pressed another button. Same code. Another attempt. Same result. The officer in the back office glanced over, noticing the unexpected signal on their monitor. He looked at Reynolds and raised an eyebrow, but didn't say anything. Instead, he watched silently. Reynolds cleared his throat. "The machine must be glitching," he muttered. Ariana's expression remained unchanged. She wasn't smug. She wasn't angry. She wasn't impatient. She simply waited. Reynolds crossed his arms. "Tell you what," he said loudly, trying to keep control of the moment. "If you're so confident, let's see you handle the orientation assessment. If you pass, maybe then we'll talk about your ID. Sound fair?" It wasn't fair at all, but Ariana nodded. "Yes, sir." "Good," he snapped. "Follow the others. I'll be watching." Ariana turned to walk toward the assessment area. She felt the eyes of every recruit on her back. Curious, judgmental, amused. She didn't mind. She wasn't here for their approval. What mattered was why she had come. She had trained for this moment, not for recognition but for purpose. She had seen things in her life that most people never saw. She had stepped into emergencies where no one else wanted to. And through all of it, she had learned that real strength wasn't in looking powerful. It was in staying calm when others panicked. It was in showing up when things were difficult. It was in doing the right thing when no one believed in you. As she walked, she felt a small weight in her pocket. The emergency kit she always carried. It wasn't part of the uniform yet, but she never went anywhere without it. Inside that kit was something that had saved lives before, something she hoped she wouldn't need today, something the Marines called Red Needle. Reynolds didn't know anything about that. Not yet. Ariana stepped into the training hall quietly, ready for whatever challenge came next. She didn't need to prove her worth to anyone, but life had taught her that sometimes people only understand you after they see what you can do. And sooner than anyone expected, much sooner, everyone on that base, including Captain Reynolds, was about to find out exactly who she was. Ariana stood at the entrance of the training hall, waiting for the next instructions. The space was wide and bright, filled with recruits who were stretching, checking their shoes, or whispering nervously about what the assessment might include. The room smelled of fresh paint and the faint scent of cleaning supplies, the kind they used early in the morning before activities began. She found a spot near the side wall, away from the loud groups. She always preferred being slightly out of the crowd. Not because she was shy, but because she liked to observe first. Watching people told her more than any words could. Across the room, Captain Reynolds walked in with a clipboard, pretending not to look at her, though it was obvious he kept checking if she was still there. His jaw was tight. He liked control. He liked being right. And right now, the small doubt caused by the scanner's strange response bothered him more than he wanted to admit. Ariana knew people like him. People who judged quickly, spoke loudly, and never expected to be wrong. People who often underestimated quiet individuals. She didn't dislike him. She just understood him more than he understood her. A loud whistle sounded, and another officer stepped forward. He looked older, calmer, someone who had been training recruits for years. "Listen up," he called out. "You're here for your first orientation assessment. We're not testing strength today. We're testing awareness, teamwork, and how you react under pressure. Fail to follow instructions, and you're dismissed early." The room fell silent. Ariana took a deep breath, letting her shoulders relax. She was ready. The officer continued, "You'll move through 3 stations. First is basic coordination. Second is emergency response. Third is cognitive judgment. You'll rotate every 20 minutes. No running unless instructed. No talking unless asked. Understood?" "Yes, sir," the recruits shouted. Ariana gave a small nod instead of shouting. It still counted. As the groups separated, Ariana joined the line for Station 1. Reynolds stood nearby, arms crossed, scanning faces like a teacher waiting for someone to mess up. When Ariana passed him, he didn't say anything, though she felt his eyes following her. She didn't let it bother her. Station 1 was simple, small hurdles, a balance beam, and a short path of markers requiring timed footwork. For most recruits it was a warm-up, but some looked worried. Ariana watched the first few in line. One tripped over a hurdle. Another lost balance halfway across the beam. A third went too fast and missed 2-foot markers entirely. When it was Ariana's turn, she moved without hesitation. Her steps were steady, her breathing quiet and even. She crossed the beam like she had done it 100 times, not wobbling even once. She finished the footwork path with perfect rhythm. The officer marking scores raised an eyebrow in mild surprise. "Good form," he said. Ariana simply nodded in thanks and stepped aside. Reynolds, watching from the corner, pressed his lips into a thin line. He didn't clap, didn't comment. He wasn't ready to admit anything yet. Station 2, though, was the one that mattered most to Ariana. Emergency response. Not combat, just first aid awareness. Something she had studied long before she ever thought of joining the Marines. The station had several dummies on the floor, each with a different simulated condition. The recruits were given prompts. One dummy needed breathing support, another needed bandaging, another had a timed condition where the recruit had to identify the issue fast. Ariana's group stepped forward. A young recruit beside her whispered nervously, "I hope this isn't too complicated." She offered a gentle smile. "Just listen carefully. You'll be all right." He seemed surprised by her calmness and nodded gratefully. The instructor blew the whistle. "Begin." Everyone rushed to their assigned dummies. Some recruits panicked, flipping the instruction cards over 2 or 3 times. Others overthought and froze. Ariana knelt beside her dummy, scanning the instruction card once. She took a deep breath and began working. Her hands moved with muscle memory she didn't even have to think about. She checked the breathing pattern, adjusted the airway position, then secured the stabilizing strap. She finished in half the allotted time. She didn't look up to see who noticed. She wasn't doing it for attention, but she could feel several eyes on her, including the instructors. Meanwhile, across the room, the nervous recruit she had encouraged earlier couldn't figure out the strap placement. His hands shook as he tried to tighten it the wrong way. Seeing his frustration, Ariana hesitated for a moment. She wasn't supposed to help, but when the instructor wasn't looking, she whispered softly, "Turn it around. The buckle should face upward." He quickly followed her words. Relief washed across his face when it worked. "Thank you," he mouthed. She smiled lightly and returned to her task. When the time ended, the instructor blew the whistle again. "Those who completed the task correctly, stand beside your dummies." Ariana stood. So did the young recruit she helped. So did only a handful of others. The instructor nodded in approval. Reynolds watched from a few steps behind him, arms still crossed, but his expression had changed slightly. He was no longer smirking. He was studying her now, trying to understand how she moved so confidently in this station. He whispered something to the instructor, who nodded. "Ariana," the instructor said, reading her name from the clipboard. "Good work." A few recruits looked at her with new curiosity. She didn't look back. Then came Station 3, cognitive judgment. The room had tables with puzzles, observation tests, and simulated decision-making cards. Nothing physically demanding, but mentally challenging. A recruit needed to think clearly and quickly. Ariana sat at a table with 4 other recruits. The test began with an observation challenge, spotting details in a short video clip. Most people got 2 or 3 details. Ariana listed 8, calmly and evenly. Next came a problem-solving puzzle with colored blocks. A few recruits struggled, trying to force pieces into shapes that didn't fit. Ariana completed it smoothly in under 3 minutes. The instructor once again raised a brow. "You've done this before?" "No, sir," she answered honestly. "I just follow the patterns." The final activity was a timed decision test. Each card presented a scenario, and the recruit had 10 seconds to choose the safest and most effective response. Ariana read each card carefully but moved quickly. She didn't guess. She assessed. When the timer ended, she set her cards down neatly. As the instructors collected results, Reynolds walked over, pretending it was routine. But it was clear that he wasn't expecting her to perform this well. Not after the way he had spoken to her earlier. He looked at the table of completed cards, then at Ariana. "You seem to know your way around these tests," he said quietly. Ariana kept her voice steady. "I try my best, sir." Reynolds studied her for another moment before walking away. His confidence had cracked slightly, not broken but shaken. When all stations finished, the recruits gathered again. The main instructor reviewed scores, calling out names of those who passed. Almost everyone expected Ariana to struggle in at least one area. She wasn't flashy, she didn't talk much, and she didn't push herself forward like some of the louder recruits did. But her name was called near the top of the list. The recruits around her exchanged surprised glances. Some nodded silently, impressed. The young recruit she had helped whispered, "You're really good. How do you stay so calm?" Ariana shrugged lightly. "I've had practice." She didn't go into detail, but her thoughts drifted back to the places she'd been before this. Small clinics with limited supplies. Long nights staying awake to check on patients. Outdoor treatment tents where she worked in poorly lit areas, doing whatever she could with whatever she had. Her calmness didn't come from confidence, it came from necessity. Meanwhile, in the back of the room, Reynolds spoke quietly with another officer. Ariana caught a piece of the conversation. "The scanner shouldn't show that code unless she has higher clearance, but she's just a recruit." She looked away. She knew this day would come sooner or later. People always wondered how she ended up with certain authorizations. They wondered how someone her age and appearance earned trust from people far above them. But she wasn't ready to explain. Not yet. The instructor dismissed the group, telling them to return in an hour for the formal briefing. As Ariana stepped outside into the sunlight, she breathed in deeply. The air was warmer now, carrying the smell of fresh asphalt and cut grass. She walked to a small bench under the shade of a tree and sat down, placing her emergency kit gently beside her. She opened it for a moment, not to use anything, but simply to check that everything was still in place. Her fingers brushed over the sealed compartment that held the red needle, a tool she hoped she wouldn't need today. But life had a way of bringing unexpected moments, and she could feel that something was coming. Not danger, just change. A change she couldn't avoid. A change that would make everyone on the base, including Reynolds, see her in a completely new light. The hour passed slowly for most of the recruits, but for Ariana, it went by in a quiet blur. She sat under the tree until it was almost time to return, watching the sunlight move across the ground and listening to the distant sounds of drills happening around the base. She didn't talk to anyone, didn't rehearse anything in her head, and didn't let her thoughts drift too far. She simply rested, saving her energy. When the bell sounded, she stood, brushed off the dust on her knees, and headed back toward the main building. Recruits hurried past her in groups, their voices filled with excitement or nerves. Some were talking about how hard the tests had been. Some were complaining about the balance beam. Others were still joking about mistakes they'd made at the emergency response station. But a few talked about her. "Did you see that quiet girl? She finished every station like it was nothing. Yeah, she's different. I don't know how, but she is. She didn't even rush. She acted like she knew exactly what to do." Ariana heard every word, but she didn't turn around. She didn't need recognition. She didn't even want it. She just hoped the attention wouldn't become a distraction. When she walked inside, she noticed a subtle shift in how people looked at her. They weren't laughing anymore. They weren't whispering in doubt. They were curious now, curious in a way that made some of them uneasy. Captain Reynolds was already standing near the front of the briefing room. His arms were crossed again. But this time the expression on his face wasn't amusement or impatience. It was something else. Something closer to suspicion. As Ariana took a seat toward the side, Reynolds' eyes landed on her for a brief second. She could tell he wasn't just watching her. He was studying her, trying to understand why someone he had dismissed so quickly had turned out to be the most consistent performer all day. The briefing began. Another officer stepped forward and started explaining the week's agenda: rules, basic expectations, living arrangements, meal schedules, emergency protocols. It was routine but important. Most recruits scribbled notes quickly, their hands shaking slightly from the excitement of being officially welcomed. Ariana listened quietly, taking mental notes rather than writing anything down. She had always remembered things better that way. Halfway through the briefing, one of the recruits beside her started breathing strangely. At first, it was subtle. Quick inhale, a slightly shaky exhale. Ariana noticed instantly, but she didn't react. Not yet. She watched carefully. A minute later, the recruit's breathing grew uneven. He shifted in his seat, trying to hide his discomfort, but his face was turning pale. He pressed a hand against his chest, trying to stay calm. Ariana leaned slightly toward him and whispered, "Are you all right?" He shook his head, his eyes unfocused. I don't feel right." Ariana's heart rate picked up, not in panic, but in readiness. Something was wrong. His breathing wasn't the kind caused by nerves. His fingers were trembling faintly, and small patches of redness appeared around his neck. She had seen this before, many times. A reaction, a serious one. She quietly raised her hand. "Sir," she said softly. The instructor continued speaking, not noticing her at first. She raised her voice a little, not loud, but clear. "Sir." This time he stopped. "Yes. Someone needs help?" Ariana said calmly, pointing to the recruit beside her. All heads turned. The recruit tried to speak, but his voice came out strained and tight. His breaths came faster now, shallow and panicked. The instructor stepped toward him. "You all right, son?" The recruit shook his head again. His breathing worsened. A few recruits around him backed up instinctively, unsure what was happening. Ariana stood. Captain Reynolds stepped forward quickly, raising a hand. "Everyone stay calm," he said, though his own voice carried a hint of worry. "We'll call the medical team." Ariana's voice was steady. "There's no time. He needs help right now." Reynolds frowned, trying to keep control. "We have procedures." Ariana interrupted, not out of disrespect, but urgency. "Sir, with respect, he won't stay conscious long enough if we wait. He needs immediate support." The instructor looked torn, unsure whether to follow protocol or trust her judgment. Meanwhile, the recruit's breathing collapsed into sharp, strained gasps. His hands shook uncontrollably now. Ariana didn't wait for permission anymore. She stepped beside him, lowering him gently to the floor so he wouldn't fall. "What are you doing?" Reynolds demanded. "Helping," she answered simply. She set her emergency kit on the ground, her movements efficient and controlled. Her hands didn't shake. She had done this so many times that her fingers knew exactly where each piece belonged. She opened the kit, scanning the compartments quickly. Then her hand paused over the sealed section where the red needle was stored. She looked at the recruit's symptoms again. Pale skin, shallow breathing, rapid pulse, tightening chest. It was clear. She unsealed the compartment and pulled out the small injector. The room fell silent. No one spoke. No one even breathed. Reynolds froze. He recognized the injector not by experience but by reputation. It was rare. Very rare. Something that only authorized field medics carried. Something that only a few trainees ever even saw. What is that?" one of the recruits whispered. Another said softly, "Is that red?" The injector was small, metallic, with a thin red stripe running across its center. Everyone had heard rumors about it, Stories from advanced trainees, tales passed around at training camps. They called it the red needle, the tool used when someone's life depended on seconds. Ariana held it carefully, then looked up at the instructor. "Sir," she said, "I need clearance to use this." The instructor hesitated, but only for a second. One look at the struggling recruit made his decision clear. "Use it," he said firmly. Reynolds' mouth dropped slightly. "But she can't. She's helping him," the instructor said sharply. "Let her work." Ariana leaned over the recruit, her voice gentle but steady. "You're going to be okay," she whispered. "Just stay with me." His eyes were glassy now, but he nodded faintly. She positioned the injector on the safe spot along his upper arm, precisely where she had been trained to place it. She pressed the release. A soft click. A small vibration. A quick injection. The recruit inhaled sharply. Then another breath, slightly stronger. Then another, deeper this time. The redness around his neck began to fade slowly. His hands steadied little by little. His chest relaxed. Ariana stayed beside him, monitoring every detail of his recovery. She didn't move away, didn't look up at the room. Her focus remained entirely on the recruit. After a full minute, he looked at her with clearer eyes. I can breathe," he whispered, still weak but improving. "You're all right now," she said softly. Only then did she lift her head. The room was completely still. Every recruit stared at her like she had just done something impossible. The instructor looked stunned but relieved. And Captain Reynolds, his face had changed completely. The disbelief, the doubt, the smirks, all gone. Replaced by something he wasn't used to feeling. Shock. Ariana stood and quietly packed her kit again, handling the red needle with careful respect before sealing it back in its compartment. The instructor stepped closer. "How did you know what to do?" Ariana answered honestly. "I've seen this before. Many times." Reynolds, still speechless, took a few steps toward her. His voice, when it finally came out, was softer than anyone expected. "Your ID," he whispered. "That clearance. That injector. Who are you?" Ariana didn't answer immediately. She wasn't trying to be mysterious. She just didn't know how to explain her past in a single sentence. "I'm someone who came here to serve," she finally said. "Just like everyone else." But everyone in the room knew she wasn't just like everyone else. Not anymore. Not after what they'd seen. And for the first time since she stepped onto the base, Captain Reynolds wasn't laughing. He was listening. The next morning felt strangely quiet, as if the whole neighborhood was waiting for something to happen. The sun wasn't even fully up yet, but a soft light had already started filling the sky. The girl woke up earlier than usual, unable to stop thinking about what had happened. The training session, the unexpected strength she showed, and the shock on the black belt trainer's face. It all replayed in her mind again and again. She sat on the edge of her bed, tying her shoes slowly, thinking about how different she felt inside. It wasn't a feeling of pride or ego. It was something calmer, like she had finally discovered a part of herself she didn't know existed. She took a deep breath and looked around her small room. The window, the books on the shelf, the old wooden chair. Everything felt the same, yet she felt changed. When she stepped outside, the morning air was cool and a bit misty. The ground smelled fresh, and a few birds were singing somewhere far away. She liked mornings like this because they made her feel peaceful. As she walked down the street toward the training center, she noticed how empty everything was. The shops were closed, and the streetlights were still on. She wrapped her arms around herself, enjoying the quiet. As she reached the building, she stopped. The door was slightly open. That was strange because the building was always locked until the trainer arrived. She pushed the door wider and stepped inside carefully. The lights were off except for one small bulb near the far end of the room, and she could hear quiet movements, like someone shifting their weight. When she got closer, she saw the black belt trainer standing there, practicing slow movements on his own. His arms moved with perfect control, and his legs were steady and balanced. He didn't seem to notice her at first, or maybe he was pretending not to. She watched him, trying to understand what was going on in his mind. He looked different this morning, more focused, more serious. Then he finally stopped and turned to look at her. There was no smile, no joke, none of the playful teasing he had done before. He looked directly at her, as if he had made a decision. "You came early," he said quietly. She nodded. "I couldn't sleep." He walked closer, still watching her carefully. The room felt colder as he approached, not because he was angry, but because something heavy hung in the air. "I've been thinking," he said. "Yesterday wasn't normal. I've trained many students and I've seen many different kinds of talent. But what you did," he paused, searching for the right words. "It wasn't just strength. It was instinct. You reacted to a move you've never seen before. You countered it without hesitation. That doesn't happen by accident." She didn't know how to respond. She looked at the floor, not wanting to seem proud or defensive. "I don't know how I did it," she said softly. "I just reacted." He tilted his head slightly, studying her. "Exactly. Some people need years to learn what you did in seconds." She swallowed, still unsure where this conversation was going. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She wasn't trying to prove anything. She just liked learning and doing her best. He stepped back and pointed to the center of the room. "Come here." She followed him quietly. "Let's test something," he said, lowering into a stance. "This time don't think. Just react like you did yesterday." Her heart started beating faster. She wasn't scared, but she could feel a rush of nerves. He moved first, fast but controlled. His arm swung toward her shoulder, not to hurt her, but to test her response. Her body moved before she even processed the movement. She blocked it cleanly. He tried again from another angle. She blocked again. Then he tried something more complex, footwork, angles, shifts in balance. She reacted to all of it naturally, as if her body already knew what to do. She didn't feel like she was fighting. She felt like she was listening to a song with a rhythm she instinctively understood. He stepped back, breathing a little heavier now. His eyes were full of surprise but also something else, respect. "Do you understand what this means?" he asked slowly. She shook her head. "It means you're not just learning this. You're built for this." His words hung in the air, almost too heavy for her to hold. She wasn't used to being told something like that. She wasn't used to anyone looking at her like she was capable of something special. She looked away, trying to calm her breathing. "I don't want to cause trouble," she said quietly. "I'm just here to learn." He softened a little. "You're not causing trouble. You're surprising everyone, including me, and that's not a bad thing." She didn't know how to feel. She had always been quiet, always trying not to draw attention. But now, attention had found her on its own. He walked toward the shelf where training equipment was stored and pulled out a pair of soft practice pads. He tossed one to her. She caught it without thinking. "We're not doing a full match," he explained. "Just movements. I want to see something." He stepped forward and raised his pad. She mirrored him, holding her pad lightly. He tapped her pad gently. She responded with the same force. He tapped again, faster. She matched it. He increased speed. She kept up. He switched hands. She switched too. Then, without warning, he changed direction, moving low and then high. Her pad shot up at the perfect moment, blocking him cleanly. He froze. "You didn't hesitate," he said. Her hands trembled a little. "I'm trying my best." He sighed, more amazed than frustrated. "This isn't your best. This is your natural ability." They both stepped back and lowered their pads. He leaned against the wall, rubbing the back of his neck. "You know, people train years for timing like that." He shook his head gently. "And you do it like it's nothing." She sat down on the floor, feeling overwhelmed. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I didn't know I could do any of this." He sat across from her, his voice calmer now. "Sometimes," he said, "people spend their whole lives without ever discovering what they're truly capable of. You found yours without even searching." She thought about that. She had never imagined herself being good at something like this. She always assumed she was just another person trying to learn something new. But now it felt like life had quietly opened a door for her. showing her a path she never expected. After a few moments of silence, he spoke again. "I want to train you differently from now on," he said. "Not harsher, not harder, just with more purpose. You have something rare, and I want to help you understand it." She lifted her head. "Why? Why help me?" He smiled for the first time that morning, but it wasn't his usual playful smile. It was genuine. "Because talent like yours deserves to grow," he said. "And because you're humble about it. That's the best combination." She felt a warmth inside her chest, a kind of gratitude she didn't know how to express. "Okay," she said quietly. "I'll try." He stood up and offered her a hand. She took it and rose to her feet. "Good," he said. "Let's start." The rest of the session was unlike anything she had ever experienced. The trainer was focused, serious, and fully committed. He showed her moves step by step, and every time, she picked them up faster than he expected. He corrected her form gently, explained body balance, and even slowed down his own movements so she could study them. But the more they practiced, the more he realized she wasn't just copying him. She was understanding the movements in her own way, adapting them naturally. At one point, he stopped and looked at her with disbelief. "You're adjusting the technique," he said. "Not many beginners do that." She blinked. "Is that bad?" He shook his head. "It's impressive." By the time they finished, the sun was high in the sky, and the room felt warm. She wiped sweat from her forehead, breathing hard but smiling a little. She felt proud, not because she was better than anyone, but because she had found something she truly enjoyed. As they prepared to leave, the trainer turned to her one last time. "Tomorrow," he said, "there's something I want you to see. It's important." She looked at him curiously. "What is it?" "You'll know when you get here," he replied with a small grin. She didn't know what he had planned, but she could feel something big was coming. And this time she wasn't scared. She was ready. The girl woke up early again, but this time the morning felt different. The air had a quiet excitement to it, like the world knew something she didn't. She sat on her bed for a moment, thinking about what the trainer had said the day before. "Tomorrow, there's something I want you to see." His voice kept echoing in her mind, making her more curious with every passing hour. She got dressed quickly, tying her shoes tighter than usual, as if she wanted to be prepared for anything. On her way out, she paused at the doorway, took a deep breath and stepped outside. The sky was still a pale shade of gold, and the cool breeze brushed against her face. She liked mornings like this. Simple, quiet, and honest. As she walked toward the training center, she noticed more people than usual walking around. Some looked tired, some rushed, others just moved slowly, but everyone seemed to have their own rhythm. She watched them for a moment, wondering if they also had something waiting for them that day. When she reached the building, she saw the lights already on. That was rare. The trainer normally arrived just a few minutes before her. She felt a tiny spark of nervousness but pushed the door open anyway. Inside, the first thing she noticed was the mats on the floor had been cleaned and freshly arranged. Equipment was lined up neatly on the shelves, and the air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. Everything looked spotless, almost too prepared. Then she saw him, the trainer, standing in the center of the room with his arms crossed, watching her as if he had been waiting for her arrival. "You're right on time," he said with a calm smile. She nodded and placed her bag down near the wall. "You said you wanted to show me something." He motioned for her to come closer. "Yes, but before that we need to warm up. Today's important." She wasn't sure what he meant, but she followed him. They started with basic movements, light stretches, footwork, breathing exercises. She noticed he was studying her very closely, but not in a stressful way. It felt more like he was making sure she understood something she didn't even know she was learning. After the warm-up, he stepped back and gestured toward the door. "Hold on," she said. "We're going outside?" He nodded. "Just for a moment." She followed him, and when they stepped out into the morning sunlight, she saw a small group of people gathered near the side of the building. They were other students, some she had seen before and some she hadn't. They all looked curious, talking quietly among themselves. She glanced at the trainer. "What's happening?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked to the center of the group and raised his hand, signaling everyone to quiet down. "Thank you all for coming early," he said. "Today, I want to introduce someone." Her stomach tightened. She suddenly felt like everyone's eyes were on her. "This girl," he continued, "has been training with me for a short time. Many of you don't know her yet, but you're about to see something I rarely talk about." A few of the students exchanged looks, confused. The trainer turned toward her and motioned for her to step forward. She did, slowly, unsure of what he was expecting. The students looked at her politely, some with friendly curiosity, some with quiet skepticism. "She has a natural instinct," he said. "Something I've only seen a few times." She felt heat rise in her cheeks. She wasn't used to being the center of attention. One of the older students raised his hand. "Sensei, what do you mean by instinct?" The trainer smiled slightly. "You'll see." He turned to her and spoke softly so only she could hear. "Don't be nervous. Just trust yourself." She nodded even though her heart was beating fast. He then asked one of the older, more experienced students to step forward. A tall young man with controlled movements and a calm expression. He wasn't intimidating, but he definitely looked like someone who had trained for years. "I want you two to do a simple drill," the trainer explained. "Nothing aggressive, just reaction training." The student nodded respectfully and took position. She mirrored him, her hands light and calm. The trainer clapped once. "Begin." The older student moved first, throwing a slow, controlled tap toward her shoulder. She blocked it without thinking. He tried again, a little faster. She responded instantly. He switched angles, tried stepping in, tried stepping out. Each time she reacted perfectly, as if she knew every move before he made it. The more they moved, the more whispers spread through the watching students. "She's fast. How long has she been training? That timing, that's not normal." She heard the whispers but tried not to let them distract her. She stayed focused, reacting naturally. After a few more exchanges, the trainer called for them to stop. The older student lowered his hands and looked at her with genuine surprise. "How long have you been doing this?" he asked softly. She shrugged shyly. "Not long." He shook his head in disbelief. "That's amazing." She didn't know what to say. The trainer stepped forward. "This is what I've been talking about," he said to the group. "She has something rare, and I want all of you to understand why I'm paying special attention to her training." The students nodded respectfully, some still amazed. The trainer placed a hand on her shoulder gently. "You did well. Very well." She felt a warm rush in her chest. She had never been praised like that in front of others before. "Now," the trainer said, turning to the group again, "we go back inside." They followed him, and the girl walked beside him silently. She could feel her heart still racing, but there was a new kind of confidence settling inside her. Back inside, the trainer guided the group into a semicircle around the mat. He stood in the center again, and she stood beside him. "I want to explain something," he said. "Talent alone is not enough. Many people have talent but never learn discipline. Others have discipline but struggle with technique. But this girl has something balanced. Instinct, humility, and patience." She looked down, feeling shy but also proud. "From today onward," he continued, "I will be training her with a different method, not separated from the rest of you, but with a deeper focus on understanding her movements." Several students nodded with interest. He turned to her and asked, "Are you ready for that?" She looked up at him. "Yes," she said quietly but confidently. "Good," he said. "Let's begin." The next part of the training was more detailed than anything she had ever done. The trainer showed the group a series of slow, flowing movements, almost like a dance. The students practiced them one by one, but the trainer stayed close to her, guiding her gently, helping her understand each shift in weight, each angle of her arms, and each breath she took. She followed him closely. She felt the flow of the movements, the rhythm of each step. It didn't feel forced. It felt natural. The trainer watched her carefully. At one point, he said quietly, "You don't copy the movement. You understand it. She didn't fully understand what he meant, but she nodded anyway. The students practiced together, and she noticed that some of them started watching her for guidance. For the first time in her life, she wasn't the quiet girl standing in the corner. She was someone others noticed, someone others respected. Hours passed, and by the end of the session, everyone looked tired but satisfied. The trainer ended the class with a short talk, reminding everyone that strength isn't about showing off. It's about control, patience, and respect. After the class, a few students walked up to her. "You were really good today," one of them said. "You learned fast," another added. Their words felt warm. She wasn't used to compliments, but she appreciated them deeply. As the students slowly left the room, the trainer walked over to her. "Stay for a moment," he said softly. She nodded. When they were alone, he crossed his arms and looked at her with a thoughtful expression. "There's one more thing you should know," he said. She waited. "Natural instinct like yours doesn't appear randomly. It usually comes from something, either your environment, your past, or something you've observed without realizing it." She frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" He looked at her carefully. "Is there anyone in your family who trained before? Anyone who taught you something without calling it training?" She thought hard. "Not that I know of." He nodded slowly, still thinking. "Sometimes," he said gently, "people carry hidden strengths from the way they grew up, and sometimes they discover them only when life gives them the chance." She didn't fully understand, but she felt there was more to learn. He smiled. "That's enough for today. You did great." As she walked home, the sky was already shifting toward evening. She felt tired, but it was the good kind of tired, the kind that comes from doing something meaningful. Her mind was full of questions, but she also felt hopeful. She didn't know what would come next, but she knew she wasn't the same girl she had been a few days ago. Something inside her had awakened, and now there was no going back.